I took a company that was doing maybe 400,000 or 400 million a year to 1.8 billion. So the leadership had a good culture. I had to adjust, but then also the employees that we brought in had to believe in the culture that we were trying to drive, and that was to achieve the results.
Hello, and we are so grateful to be here today, back with the Trustedpreneur podcast. Today here with David Ritchie, my partner. And today we're going to talk about cult. You don't need a better team. You need to build a cult. And we're going to dive in and we're going to show you how that works, because we know that cult is short for culture. David.
That's right, Madeline. Today we're going to talk about what most leaders get wrong about this topic. And also, one of the things that we always say is great culture isn't about snacks, it's not about slogans, and it's not about Slack channels. It's about belief systems and rewriting your identity.
Correct. And it all starts at the top.
Yes, leadership.
Yes, it does. And we do have the way we build our businesses and the way when we worked in corporate, right? Because the one thing that people have to understand, that culture doesn't look specifically to anything other than the leadership that is on top, right? So, for example, you work for a company. We work for the same company at one point, right? And we have found that every corporate office or every corporation has different cultures. So let's dig in a little bit about that, and let's talk about what your experience was, because you work for multiple companies and the culture was completely different.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Madeline, because I think what most people think is culture is a one size fits all. And in reality, culture is, as you said, about the leadership. And one of the things that, I experienced and we experienced, right? So we both worked with a company that would have been very autocratic, but also very militaristic in its style and its presence. But when you're looking at culture, it's about the mission that they set. And the one thing is, even though that was what a lot of people would say, oh, that leadership style isn't for me, and it may not be for you. What they did, though, is they recruited people to work for them that bought into the vision, right? So even though they were very much a militaristic organization, people believed in the goals and the visions of what they wanted to accomplish for their customers. To me, that is the number one thing, because simultaneously, after I worked for that company, I worked for a company that promoted that they had great culture. They did have great culture. It was a more, what I would call more of a foo-foo culture. They did have a lot of things about like snacks on Fridays and, the way people work together and, all these different things. And so I remember when I transitioned to that company that it was very difficult because I was brought up in a different culture.
I remember.
and I had an employee that said, it's the culture. It's the culture. And I'm like, but I'm leading the culture.
Yeah.
And ended up being in that time, right? I took a company that was doing maybe 400,000 or 400 million a year to 1.8 billion. So the leadership had a good culture. I had to adjust, but then also the employees that we brought in had to believe in the culture that we were trying to drive, and that was to achieve the results.
So you would agree that the word cult isn't evil?
When we came up with this topic, I will be honest with you, I wasn't quite there yet. But I am now. And I think about this from our standpoint of how we built and grew our companies and our businesses, right? Is we had a strong leadership, i.e. you. And you were setting the stage on what your expectations were for our company.
Right.
And if people didn't fit that, it was not
short-lived.
Right. It was short-lived. And that's why that's one of the first things that the leaders make a mistake on, right? Is they hire for skill.
Right.
tolerate mediocrity and call that culture.
So what are the characteristics of a good work culture?
That's $1 million question. Because the difference between having $1 million in gross sales versus a company that doesn't has to do with everything about what the mission and the value system is for that organization. It is not necessarily your product. It's not your customers yet. It is how you're presenting what you believe, right? And that your people mimic the leadership. And you can be the best salesperson, right? But if you're selling for the wrong purpose in a company that doesn't believe in that, then you have a broken model. So I think the first thing is that the leadership has to be strong within their own convictions, unyielding, unapologetic. This is who we are. This is what we do. And this is the experience we want our customers to have.
So what I heard you say was it's clear language, right?
Yes.
Understanding the mission of the organization, share identity, right? And everyone knows it.
Yes.
Everyone breathes it. Everyone bleeds it.
Well, and I think that that's really well stated. And I think that, right, so it's not built on the policies. It's built on the belonging, the psychological belonging of the people and how the leadership is. So everybody has to feel like they're moving in the right direction, the same direction. Otherwise, you have conflict.
Right.
And when you have conflict, that is a person that is not participating in the culture. If the leadership pivots on how they're leading, then they're the problem. If it's the employee that's not willing to do what they said, what they're being asked to do because they don't believe in something about it, then they're the problem. So I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as I think back, one of the reasons why we are successful and we grew really fast, one of our most important things that we had conviction on, and it was non-negotiable, it was the customer experience. And that is our culture. And that it bleeds through the field when we be represented in the field by our agents, our employees, when they handle transactions with our clients, and our consumers, right? So that is so important, but that's in our organization. But when we worked for the one company, the same company that we worked together at one point, it was not about that. It was a matrix. And everyone understood that. Everybody that worked for that company understood that was the culture, whether it was militaristic or not. We enjoyed it. We were rewarded for it. And we did well. Everybody did well. And if you weren't about that, you weren't going to last.
Well, an interesting thing is people that didn't do well in it that said it was a bad culture. I know thousands of people that work for that company, and they will say it was the greatest culture.
So basically what you're saying and what we're describing here, the culture doesn't have to have, it's an identity, and it comes from the leadership of whoever is head spearing that initiative.
Right.
So it's not a black or white. It is not one size fits all, basically.
That's totally correct.
Right. So go ahead.
Well, no, and I think that, and that's where leadership, and there's a lot of leaders that don't understand what type of leader they are, right? And there's a number of different categories that there are, and I think that that's the first thing, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're working for a company. Leadership first has to understand who they are, right? For example, you are a visionary. I need to know that about you as I work with you, and you need to know that because you need to understand how you work with me, and I need to understand as a leader how I work with you. And then equally, we need to be able to understand for our people how we need to work with them, because even though they may not be in leadership roles, if we're hiring correctly and we're recruiting the correct group, right? We're recruiting a cult,
Mm-hmm.
right? A bunch of followers, right?
That's
But
right.
what we don't want to recruit is followers that don't know how to be leaders. We want employees that lead, right? Whether they're leading themselves or they're leading a group, right? So if you have managers, they have to remember there's a leadership style they have, and that's why you created the leadership identity
Right.
assessment or quiz. And you know what's great about that is it's down available in the call notes or show notes, and they can access that and find out how their leadership style is and how they need to work with other individual type or other leadership types or other work types to understand how they can be the best leader they are.
Absolutely. And also know that the word cult is exactly that. It is a following of people that believe in your mission and vision. It is not a bad word.
No, it's not evil.
It's not evil. And I wrote here 3 truths that trustedpreneurs use to build a cult mentality. And one is you need to share enemy. You want to walk us through what that looks like? Because I bet you that people think, what do you mean you have to share a common enemy?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Are you in the room?
I am in the room. I didn't know if you were making a point on top of that one.
No. I just want. There's 3 truths, and we're going to walk through them together.
Okay, so to me that means not that you're finding an actual enemy.
Yes.
You're finding something to fight against, right? Or fight for, right? Is
Correct.
A better way of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at that from that standpoint, and it's right, because if your leadership is strong and committed, right, and their purpose, their values, and their vision and the mission, right, then they can move that group in that direction, and it's not bad, it's greatness to have that type of following.
Right. So basically, you need the share enemy. Cult rises because they rally people against something. In startups, that might be the outdated thinking, boring brands, or old ways of doing business. If your team does not know what they're fighting against, they'll never know what they fight for anything, right? So that's one. So yes, you do need a shared enemy, not in the sense that you think. It is just that you need to have something to fight for, right? And typically, when you're fighting, you have to have an adversary. So language creates loyalty, right? So that means create an internal phrase. Rally cries and culture codes. They absolutely do. So words become walls that separate the commitment from the casual.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people need to understand when you're talking about that, we're not saying make up words. We're really trying to say, give them that rally cry is true, right? And if we're all working towards something and we all get enthusiastically behind it, if we're all for one and one for all, then that means something to the people, right? And that's why, when you think about it, when, even in the military, right, when they're going towards a whatever they're trying to take in from a standpoint of whatever battle or they're in, is they're all in that together, and they understand it's all of us, and they're against that person. In that case, it is an enemy, but that's not what I'm trying to drive at right now. I'm trying to drive that they're understanding their purpose. The rally cry is the purpose.
Right.
The result in the mission are the purpose.
Yes. And the leader is the first, and the third one is the leader is the first believer, right? If you're not obsessed with your mission, don't expect loyalty.
Right. And on all fronts, right? So you think about that. For us, when we started our first business, it was all, and still to this day, every one of our businesses is all about experience, right?
We are obsessed with that mission.
And that is our mission. And
yes.
As you said, every one of our people. And, true story, this happened just the other day. We had one of our external agents, which is not a technically an employee, but we do we screen them, we vet them, we do all these things. And they did not provide a great experience for one of our clients' customers. And the team came up to me and said, what should we do? And I said, what do you think we should do? And they said, we need to deactivate her. And I said, then you already know what to do, because it's not falling in line with who we are and what our value system is.
That's right.
And I think that's the thing is if you create the cult, a number of believers in what you believe, right, in a positive way, they know what to do, because you're giving them the rules of engagement.
Right. No, that's for sure. And that is, the team has to be able to take clues of that conviction in order for them to deliver, right?
Right. And I think that, a lot of companies out there, a lot of businesses, and I think it's interesting because a lot of times, like, especially some of our franchisee clients, right? They think, oh, the franchisor is bringing the culture. No, they're bringing their culture. You have to now establish a culture of your own, because the franchisor is not working with your people every day. They're not working with your customers every day. They're telling you this is what we want done. You have to create the environment for them to do that. And to do that, you have to have people that are fanatically loyal to you. You have to
they have to be obsessed.
You have to stop trying just simply to motivate. You have to start creating meaning for them, right? And you need to give people a mission worth sacrificing for. And in that way, they will create and always exceed the metrics you establish, because it is now all about the mission. And success is an interesting thing, because it provides something for everybody. It provides them more, right? It gives them, and you're building a cult and there's success, right? And you're bringing a culture of success, and people start feeling it. They become more fanatic about you, your leadership, and then they try to bring people they know that would fit into the culture, right? So one of the challenges I saw in one company I worked for, this was after I left and we went really on our own, but what I saw is that their leadership kind of splintered on what their mission and their real values were. And you started seeing that company bring in people that didn't fit the original culture. And now there was friction. But the thing is they were bringing people that didn't value the culture in leadership roles. So now they were having a double edge, right? Because those people were then bringing people that fit their culture. Organizationally, their culture didn't fit necessarily together. And now they have a number of people that were the original culture that was making this company extremely good money and making profits year over year and growing market share, to now they're scrambling to rebuild culture.
So what would be your message to people that want to build a cult for loyalty, right? I mean, what would that be? What would that look like when you want to be you want to build fanatical loyalty?
Well, to build fanatical loyalty, you need to first be loyal. You have to be loyal to not only yourself and your mission, but you have to be loyal to your people. They will make mistakes. I know none of us as entrepreneurs or business owners like to hear that, but people do make mistakes.
How do you feel about people that are trying to motivate solely to create a fanatical loyalty? I mean, what would you say to those people? Instead of motivate people, what is the one thing that they should be doing, I guess?
So I think we go back to that. We stop trying to motivate them into something. We give them meaning, right? We give them purpose. And when you do that, then what happens is that now they start feeling the company, right? Because really all a company is a collection of people, right? And people think, I always laugh when you hear in the press is everybody's upset with the company. Well, no, it's not the company. There's somebody in that company that didn't make you feel good, right? And so you have to you have to inspire them to want to be a part of your culture. And that comes to giving them purpose and meaning.
I guess giving them a mission worth sacrificing for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, and if you give them that, they will outperform every time.
That is our experience.
Yes.
Is that
they
when you give them
outperform.
meaning and purpose, and you give them, and I know that a lot of times people use the word micromanaging as a negative, right? But you're only micromanaging because, and I don't even think that's really a word. I think what it is more what people feel if they're not being managed and led.
Nobody likes to be micromanaged.
True.
Nobody.
But,
I mean, and if you have to micromanage, you are not a good leader, and you did not make a good hire.
Right. So my point when I was saying that is, when does somebody think they're being micromanaged? It's not when they're being successful.
Right.
It's when they're struggling.
Yes. And why are they struggling though?
That's what the leader has to find out, right? But my point is that when people are being managed and led, right? Managed, here are the goals, here are the tasks, this is what I need done. And leadership and being led is, here's where we're taking you. This is your opportunity. No matter who you're working with or no matter what size company you are, right? You can have 3 employees or you can have thousands of employees, but you have to have that.
Right. So here we are, quick episode of our culture and how to navigate that area there for successful loyalty, if you will. And so you got to ask yourself the following. Is this a brand people would like to work for, or is it a movement, right? What do you want to really, truly create? And it is the question that our audience that are listening to this need to ask themselves. And if the answer is soft, then you're playing too small.
And then if they have to realize, build a cult, not a committee.
Right.
Lead like it matters.
Right.
That's really the crust of all this, is that you have to build a following, and then you ultimately have to lead.
A cult.
Which
is in essence a following.
Thanks for listening. If you got value out of this, please share it with someone you know that is trying to build culture in their business. If you have any problems that you'd like us to help you with, please drop a DM, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we possibly can. See you next week.